I switched from the iPhone 13 mini to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and the change has been wild. Going from the smallest screen phone to the largest was a huge adjustment, and while Apple discontinued the mini powerhouse, I thought it was either time to upgrade to something newer or simply just get left behind. So is the Pro Max largest screen iPhone really packing a more powerful punch than the 13 mini? Does the massive screen do anything better than the mini does? Or is it all really just a shiny, new, expensive iPhone? Well, the first thing I noticed was the incredible display. If you're coming from anything other than the 14 Pro Max, you will be mesmerized by this. It's a 120Hz display, meaning swiping through home screens, scrolling, any motion is going to look unbelievably clear. I've done a lot of switching between the mini and other devices, and every time I went back to the mini, I noticed immediately that the display seems so much lower quality. And that's because it's tapping out at 60 Hz. It's just not able to keep up with that smooth scrolling that a Pro Max can achieve. One thing I'm still trying to wrap my head around is, how is it that Apple still isn't maximizing the space of that larger screen? Maybe it's because I was using the Samsung Z Fold 5 this summer, which actually took advantage of that larger display, allowing for true multitasking and multi-column apps. Maybe it's because I'm switching from the mini and realizing it's kinda just the same experience. But I really am finding that the apps themselves aren't really doing much more for me than they did on the smaller screen. Sure, you're getting scaled content so you can see more text on screen, but other than that, it's not as adaptable as I thought it would be, and it kinda asks the question, if the screen size doesn't change how the iPhone works, why isn't there just an iPhone Mini Pro? Let me know, by the way, if you would pick up an iPhone 15 Pro if they scaled it down to a mini size. Of course, on the display is the Dynamic Island, another new feature where on the mini we had the notch. Dynamic Island is really just a hole punch for the cameras and Face ID, but it expands to give control of live activities. This is one of those features that looks cool and it gives you more info at a glance, but I have this feeling that the tap to expand for other options just won't be used as much as Apple thinks it will. Especially if you're on a Pro Max, reaching to the top of your display for anything just seems like way too much work. The next really big change is the weight of the Pro Max versus the Mini. The Mini was an incredibly mighty yet tiny and almost weightless phone. I pretty much just forgot it was in my pocket all the time because that's how light it was. Last year's Pro Max was extremely heavy to the point that it actually felt straining to hold it, but now the 15 Pro Max is made of titanium, the device is noticeably lighter and more comfortable to hold. It's still not the 13 mini, don't get me wrong, but it just feels like an acceptable weight for the size of the phone, especially compared to last year's model. The cameras were the big thing where I felt they were lacking on the mini, so on the Pro Max, that's what I'm really most excited about. You're moving from two 12 megapixel cameras, a wide and an ultra wide, to a much more dramatic camera bump, housing a 48 megapixel, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and 12 megapixel telephoto lens. It's no surprise that these will be better given that, that's why you buy a Pro Max iPhone, but how much better are they really? Here's a couple of samples of photos so that you can see for yourself, but I'll have a more in-depth comparison in my long-term review. One new feature that I'm really excited about is the new action button. I actually just finished another video specifically about this, but previously where we had the mute switch, we now have a button. And sure, you can still do the same thing if you wanted to, but if you're someone who doesn't toggle the sound often, then Apple gave us a bunch of other options that you can use, like the ability to open the camera and take a photo, or turn on the flashlight, or simply open any other app on your phone. Now, I took this to the next level and made a bunch of custom shortcuts to work with that button. So I have one where you can open a menu of actions each time you press it, which is really handy if you don't want to commit to one action. I have another where I toggle between all of my focus modes from personal, work, fitness, VittorTech, or I just turn it off completely. And with that, I can easily change my home screens, my wallpaper, and my focus filters, and the same thing happens with my watch automatically. I also have another that changes the function of the buttons based on orientation. When it's in portrait mode, it toggles the sound. When it's in landscape, it opens the camera. Check out my action button video for more on how to set these things up and then customize them. But I think this is turning out to be the most worth it change that Apple has that has potential to change your workflow over something like the iPhone 13 mini. It's one of those new features that you're actually missing if you go back. And obviously the battery life is the factor that people want to know about. I quoted the mini as giving full day battery life on average, but the Pro Max is quoting 2 full days. Now, I haven't been using the phone long enough to really conclude anything, especially since the first couple of days will be worse, but so far it's on track to be at around 50% by the end of the day, so I'll cover that in an upcoming long-term review. Overall, there's some significant adjustments that are happening when switching from the smallest iPhone to the largest. The shocking part is that none of those features have anything to do with the screen size at all, with no real optimizations that make the Max extra worth it. Now that's not to say that this phone isn't worth it, because we now have the gorgeous 120Hz display, the dynamic island, we have much better cameras, and the addition of the action button, all wrapped up into this acceptable weighted phone. It seems like this phone will be a productivity machine, and it's clear that the advancements made are pushing the 13 mini to be left behind. But if you're looking for the most pro iPhone that you can buy with the ability to change your workflow, then this is it.